There are remakes, and then there are returns to legends. And right now, PlayStation is not just revisiting a classic, it's reopening one of the most brutal origin stories gaming has ever told. The confirmation that the original Greek saga is being rebuilt from the ground up is pretty much not just nostalgia marketing. It sort of feels like Sony is preparing to reintroduce the monster that build modern action games. So what do we know? When this announcement was dropped during the PlayStation showcase, it was not loud, it wasn't flashy, it was almost confident. Like they knew they didn't need explosions or gameplay demos yet, just a little title, a promise, and suddenly the gaming world remembered exactly who Kratos used to be. Because before the quiet father figure, before the Norse mythology and emotional storytelling, there was rage, pure, mythological, world-ending rage. The original saga, God of War 1, God of War 2 and 3 weren't just successful, they redefined how cinematic action games could feel. The combat was aggressive, fluid, violent in ways few games dared to be at the time. Every fight felt like survival wrapped inside spectacle, and for a generation of players, it became the gold standard for brutal fantasy storytelling. Now, over 15 years later, that entire legacy apparently is being rebuilt, and the most fascinating part is that we barely knew anything. The project is confirmed to be in early development by Santa Monica Studio, meaning what we're seeing right now is not even marketing hype, it's foundation laying, which actually makes this remake more interesting because it suggests this is not a texture upgrade or a frame rate boost. This feels like a philosophical almost remake. Because let's be honest, the original trilogy was something legendary, but it was also a product of its time. The way it handled female characters, the shock value brutality, the pure revenge-driven storytelling. Some of it hasn't aged gracefully, and the modern God of War era proved something important, which is Kratos can evolve. When God of War launched, it didn't erase the past. It reframed it, you see, it turned Kratos from a symbol of rage into a symbol of consequence. And when God of War Ragnarok expanded this story, it proved players were ready for something deeper, something heavier, something more human. So the Trilogy Remake sits in a strange, powerful position right now. It has to honor the chaos of the original games while existing in a franchise that has matured sort of dramatically. And that is not easy. I mean, by no means it is easy. One of the biggest early signals comes from casting. The return of Carson, more important than it sounds. Carson is Greek-era Kratos, by the way. His performance wasn't subtle, it was commanding, raw, furious, almost theatrical in its delivery. And bringing him back suggests Sony wants authenticity, not a rewritten personality, but a preserved identity. Which is fascinating when you remember that modern Kratos is voiced by Christopher Judge. Two eras, two interpretations, two emotional ranges, and now potentially two fully coexisting versions of the same character inside one franchise timeline. That alone opens insane narrative possibilities. Now let's talk scale. If this is truly a remake and not a remaster, then the question becomes, how far do they go? Do they rebuild Greece with modern open zone exploration? Do they expand story content? Do they rewrite certain narrative beats? Or do they modernize puzzle design and traversal, etc.? Because if they rebuild these games inside modern PlayStation architecture, we're not talking about nostalgia anymore, we're talking about reconstructing a mythological war for an entirely new generation. And then there's the Shadow Project quietly supporting all of this. God of War, Sons of Sparta. This surprise release is more filter than content right now. It is a connective tissue, a way to re-anchor players in Greek mythology storytelling before the remake trilogy arrives. And the fact that it explores Kratos' younger years hints at something bigger. Sony might be rebuilding the entire Greek timeline into one cohesive narrative arc. Imagine that. Instead of three separate classic games, imagine one unified mythological saga, seamless storytelling, expanded character arcs, deeper political tension between the gods, more emotional build-up before Kratos' ultimate war against Olympus. That's remake potential, but there's also risk. Because the original trilogy was unapologetic, it didn't care about moral nuance. It was about vengeance, pure and simple. If the remake sanitizes that too much, it risks losing the identity that made those games legendary in the first place. But if it keeps everything exactly the same, it risks feeling outdated. The perfect remake lives somewhere in the middle. Now, here's where speculation gets interesting, we think. If this trilogy is being rebuilt for modern hardware, combat will likely evolve dramatically. The old combo-driven system was revolutionary back then, of course. Modern players expect weight, impact, environmental interactions, and tactical variety. The Norse games proved Santa Monica can deliver that, so imagine classic Blades of Chaos combat but with like modern animation blending, enemy AI, and environmental destructions. That's not nostalgia, that is basically resurrection. And visually, Greek mythology on modern hardware is like terrifying to image. Titan-scale battles rebuilt for modern particle systems, ocean storms rendered in real time, Olympus itself redesigned as a living, shifting divine city instead of a static background. Yeah, it could be visually historic. But maybe the most important part is not even combat or the graphics, it's just emotional context. Because players now know where Kratos ends up. They know the father, the regret, the silence, the restraint. So roleplaying the Greek saga through that lens could transform how players experience the game. Every violent decision becomes foreshadowing, every betrayal becomes inevitable tragedy, every victory feels hollow because we know the cost already. That is storytelling power the original trilogy actually never had, and Sony is smart enough to know that. Consider this, early development means we are years away, probably late generation PlayStation 5 or early PlayStation 6 era. And honestly, that might be perfect because it gives Santa Monica time to build this correctly, carefully, respectfully, ambitiously. Because this isn't just 3 games, this is the foundation of one of the PlayStation's most important franchises. And if done right, this remake trilogy won't just remind players why God of War mattered. It will remind the industry why mythological storytelling still works, why larger-than-life characters still resonate, why revenge stories still hit when they're grounded in emotion, why Kratos, despite everything he's done, still feels human. And maybe that's the real reason this remake matters, not because we need prettier versions of old games, but because revisiting the Greek mythology now after everything Kratos has become turns the original story into something deeper. Not just a revenge story, a tragedy, a warning, a myth about what happens when rage becomes identity. And if Santa Monica Studios understands that, if they truly rebuild this trilogy with the knowledge of what Kratos eventually becomes, this won't just be a remake, it'll be a full cycle moment. The birth of Ghosts of Sparta, retold by the legacy he created. And honestly, that might be more powerful than the originals ever were.